It is Sunday, March 8th, 2020. It is International Women's Day, and I'm in front of the Lakeshore Unitarian Universalist congregation in Lachine, protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct, also known as clergy sex abuse, which affects mostly women. There are some male victims as well, but for the most part, the victims of clergy sexual misconduct in the Unitarian Universalist religious community are women. But most ironically, one of the issues that I want to highlight is that a good number of Unitarian Universalist women are complicit in, if not the clergy abuse itself, the cover-up and denial of the clergy abuse, the failure and refusal of the Unitarian Universalist religious community to provide real justice to victims of clergy sexual misconduct. So unfortunately, there's a whole lot of Unitarian Universalist women who are complicit, at minimum, in the cover-up and denial of clergy abuse, if not, the clergy abuse itself, in the sense of doing little or nothing to provide justice, or even actively denying and obstructing justice. We've got a bunch of women laughing in the background there. Maybe they think it's funny. I don't know for sure that they're laughing at me and my protest, but they obviously don't care very much about the issues. So anyhow, let's see here, 1, 2, 3. Three women there, one with a walker, laughing away. Again, might not be about the protest itself, might be something else, but they know why I'm here. They know what I'm protesting about. They saw the signs when they drove up. So anyhow, getting back to things, it is indeed International Women's Day, and we are indeed talking about not just the fact that literally hundreds, if not some thousands, of women have been, sexually exploited, sexually abused by Unitarian Universalist ministers, including some female Unitarian Universalist ministers, because there is a certain amount of lesbian clergy sexual misconduct that happens in the Unitarian Universalist religious community. But the main issue that I want to highlight today, above and beyond that, is the fact that a whole lot of female Unitarian Universalists are complicit in the clergy abuse and the clergy abuse cover-up, denial, the failure and refusal of the Unitarian Universalist Association and individual Unitarian Universalist churches to provide any real justice to victims of clergy sexual misconduct. Above and beyond the sort of passive complicity and willful ignorance, psychological denial, and so on, there's a rather too many Unitarian Universalist women who actively involve themselves in trying to deny justice, delay justice, cover up and hide clergy sexual misconduct, and so on. So that is what this protest is about. And this picket sign here is a picket sign that I made some time ago to protest outside the CBC Massey lectures last year, because a couple of female CBC journalists are themselves guilty of helping the Unitarian Universalist religious community cover up and deny clergy sexual abuse. Carol Off of CBC As It Happens and Ainsley McClellan of CBC Daybreak both gave Montreal Unitarian clergy abuse cover-up enabler Sue Montgomery some softball interviews arising out of the fact that Sue Montgomery thought it'd be a good idea to have me accused of criminal harassment in an effort to silence me, in an effort to shut down my protest in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, and so on. And in these softball interviews where Sue Montgomery was not challenged at all by either Carol Off or Ainsley McClellan, they just swallowed all the bullshit that Sue Montgomery fed to them without any question. In both of those interviews, Sue Montgomery denied clergy sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church. I believe her exact words in terms of what she said to Carol Off were, "There's no such sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church." The word "such," I think, refers to pedophilia and rape, because that is one of the issues that I'm speaking about, is specifically pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Sunday school teachers. So when Sue Montgomery said there's no such sexual abuse, I think she was zeroing in on the pedophilia and rape, which absolutely does happen, does exist in the Unitarian Universalist religious community. But there is also less serious clergy sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, unwanted sexual advances, ministers seducing, having affairs with congregants, sexually exploiting female congregants, and so on. This definitely does happen, and there's a fair bit of it. In the case of CBC Daybreak and Ainsley McClellan, Sue Montgomery more broadly said there's no abuse in the Unitarian Church. You know, that is ridiculous. You know, like, there's all kinds of abuse in the Unitarian Church, and not just sexual abuse. There's verbal abuse, psychological abuse, abuse of power. All but there's definitely sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church. Sue Montgomery is well placed to know it. She's well placed to know that there have in fact been cases of pedophilia and rape, and yet she goes on CBC Radio. And in the case of As It Happens, that's a nationally broadcast show. So this is a not nationally broadcast CBC radio show where Sue Montgomery is telling Carol Off, and by extension thousands of Canadians, that there's no sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church, or at least there's no pedophilia and rape. You know, that's got zero credibility, and hopefully most Canadians who heard that weren't stupid enough to actually believe it. But it doesn't change the fact that Sue Montgomery is telling Canadians that there's no sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church. You know, this is part of an effort to deny, cover up, or at least minimize Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct problem. So let's see how we're doing here in terms of camera running time. Okay, so we're doing okay here. Battery's okay. So back to the monologue. A fair number of people showing up today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 vehicles. Pretty well everyone who's shown up has seen the signs as they've driven up. Most of them are probably aware of what the protest is about now, because I've protested here before. On and off, I've protested at the Lakeshore Unitarian congregation, a certain number of times, going back a good number of years. I tend to protest mainly in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, but I can't do that right now thanks to court conditions imposed on me as a result of Sue Montgomery bringing bogus criminal charges against me. So if I want to protest in front of a Unitarian Universalist church on the island of Montreal, this is the only other one. I suppose I should be thankful that the Lakeshore Unitarian Universalist Church moved some years ago from Beaconsfield to Lachine, because it's a lot easier for me to get here than to get to the previous location in Beaconsfield. Who knows, maybe they'll moved back to Beaconsfield just to make it harder for me to protest, because I expect to be protesting here for some time until I'm able to protest in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal again, which could be a few years from now. But we're working on that issue. But yes, essentially what it comes down to is that far too many Unitarian Universalist women are at least passively complicit in the clergy sexual misconduct problem that the Unitarian Universalist religious community has. They just willfully ignore it. They're in psychological denial. They don't want to know about it. They don't want to deal with it. But unfortunately, it's worse than that. A certain number of Unitarian Universalist women actively involve themselves in silencing victims, in failing or refusing to provide real justice to victims, silencing whistleblowers, censoring whistleblowers, trying to shut down my protest, trying to intimidate me into silence. There's far too many Unitarian Universalist women who are guilty of active involvement in the cover-up and denial or the minimization of Unitarian Universalism's clergy sexual misconduct problem, which, as I said, mostly affects women. One woman I haven't even named yet is Reverend Diane Olenek Rollert of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. Reverend Diane Olenek Rollert has been the minister of the Unitarian Church of Montreal for over a decade, approximately 13 years now. 13 less than lucky years, if I can say so. Reverend Diane Olenek Rollert, very early on, tried to shut down my protest in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, and she was successful. She was able to get a 1-year restraining order against me, a peace bond, by claiming to fear for her safety, and she rounded up a bunch of other Montreal Unitarians, all claiming to fear for their safety, and she somehow persuaded one of the worst judges in Quebec. I won't name her, but I can assure you that if I say the name of the judge in question to most well-informed defense lawyers and so on, they'll roll their eyes because they know, oh yeah, that one. So like I said, one of the worst judges in Quebec gave a restraining order that she never should have given because there was no reason for Reverend Diane Rollert or anyone else to fear for their safety, and yet they made this claim in an effort to shut down my protest. And yes, it was shut down for 1 year.
We should take it now.
But once the peace bond expired, I resumed my protest. And yes, they did try to get me arrested and did try to get the protest shut down again, but they were unsuccessful. But I can tell you there was a certain amount of police harassment following the end of that peace bond. In fact, I actually brought a Police Ethics Commission complaint against a sergeant detective who threatened me with arrest in an aggressive and quite frankly insulting manner. So, there's a fair bit of SPVM police repression following that. Some of it's on video, and the later stuff, 2012, 2013, there's a certain number of incidents with SPVM police officers. You can see them on YouTube. Just search SPVM and Unitarian, you'll find those videos. Or you'll find my blog post about them if you go to Google and search SPVM and Unitarian. Anyhow, it is International Women's Day 2020, March 8th, and I am protesting not only against Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct, clergy sexual abuse, which affects mostly women, but I'm also protesting against the fact that a whole lot of Unitarian Universalist women are at minimum guilty of complicit silence, passively complicit, but unfortunately far too many Unitarian Universalist women, including Unitarian Universalist ministers, including top-level UUA leadership, are actually guilty of actively involving themselves in preventing justice for victims of clergy sexual misconduct, silencing victims of clergy sexual misconduct, and also silencing whistleblowers and critics and so on. In other words, not just the victims themselves, but people who speak out against clergy sexual misconduct are essentially intimidated and threatened with legal action, and even have, in my case, bogus criminal charges brought against them or threatened in an effort to silence them. And in some cases, they're at least partially successful. So, yeah, there's lots and lots of women in the Unitarian Universalist religious community who actively involve themselves in efforts to keep Unitarian Universalism's clergy sexual misconduct problem hidden from the public, who even actively involve themselves in delaying and denying justice to victims of clergy sexual misconduct. Like actual victims seeking justice have women standing in the way between them and obtaining justice. Women like Kathleen K. Montgomery, women like Reverend Dr. I don't remember her name there, Tracy Robinson Harris, Reverend Beth Miller. These are like UUA, oh, Reverend Diane Miller for that matter too. You know, any women on the Ministerial Fellowship Committee who basically deny justice to victims of clergy sexual misconduct, they are a major part of the problem. And you can be sure that the women that I named are just the tip of the iceberg. You know, any female Unitarian Universalist minister who deletes or blocks, you know, my tweets that are trying to expose clergy sexual misconduct, well,